Pro wrestling fanatics, welcome back to the 10 count. On that Art of the Beat of the V, Richard Bronson Vickery. Popping up top, ready to party over there is Mr. John Poz. Poz, I'm hoping that everybody finds this episode to be a little too sweet as we are getting ready, man. We are celebrating. It's hard to believe. Nearly 30 years ago this week, July 7th to be exact, correct? The creation, the formation, the world would be introduced to a group that would change professional wrestling and the world, the New World Order.
Literally changed the game, changed wrestling forever. Wrestling was, maybe a surprise to some people. It was kind of the doldrums a little bit in 93, 94, 95, and then 96. It was, it was okay, but it was making the comeback thanks to the nWo, and it literally changed the game, created the Attitude Era, created the Monday Night Wars, created even characters in the WWF, such as the evil heel boss and the anti-authority, if you will. Those type of characters that kind of made a huge dent in the business. The nWo set it off.
Certainly a game changer, and we've got some topics we're going to run down and look back at the history, how we felt in those moments. We're going to look at some of those key players and the legacy that it left with Poz. What a better place to start off than getting in that time machine. Again, we came up in the rock and wrestling era, but this was a game changer that pulled in so many people from the lapsed fan. Reignited that passion, and then just the young fans. So many people's attention comes to professional wrestling. The nWo is born. Poz. Let's go back. Take me back in that moment. Where were you? What were you doing? What were those feelings? Especially for someone like you, the ultimate Hulkamaniac, brother.
So I was absolutely just obsessed with wrestling and nWo, but I actually missed the live viewing of it, believe it or not. We were on vacation. We were down the shore. We were on vacation. And
that's one of the reasons when you put your parents in a nursing home, you can point right to that moment.
Yes. So true. But we thought, because basically down the shore, you don't really rent, hotel rooms per se. You kind of rent apartments or houses or condos. And if they have pay-per-view, you hope they have it. They had a box, but it was all scrambled. So you're trying to watch it. It just gets worse and worse and worse. And you can't hear it. You can't understand it. It's funny. I have a buddy of mine who said he used to watch all his pay-per-view scrambled because his parents were too cheap to order it. So all day wondering what the hell happened the next day. So obviously had to watch Nitro. And then I found out, I was like, holy shit, what a freaking game. That was like freaking amazing. But I was wondering all day what the hell happened. But then a buddy of mine gave me his tape, and so I watched it and did it when I got back from vacation. But just unbelievable watching that Nitro. I literally just floored and shocked that Hogan turned heel and turned bad. And then reading like the newspaper and stuff, the newspapers were shocked. It was like mainstream coverage, like they couldn't believe that the Hulkster turned. And then obviously that just when you rewatch, it's just one of the greatest moments ever in the history of wrestling. It means just
did you
the
feel
whole show itself is good, but that's just the best.
Did you feel betrayed, though, growing up, the Hulkamaniac that you were, the vitamins, the prayers, the red and the yellow, man? And now here he is.
No, I loved it.
Well, because you had matured a little bit. You needed a change from your hero.
Started to turn into a little bit of a heel myself there, because freshman in high school started turning into a bit of a heel. So loved the turn. Felt like it was needed, justified, and everything. And I was like, yeah, he's right. He is the Babe Ruth of wrestling. He did create wrestling. Like damn right. He's right. This is the new world. And I loved Hall and Nash. They were so damn cool at that point, especially after they beat up Bischoff at Great American Bash, which might be one of the greatest pay-per-views of all time. And then obviously leading into Bash, which was just unbelievable. These two outsiders trying to take over the company.
I think, the moment for me, it really started in that precursor, how they set the table in the moment that really piqued my interest for, okay, I'm going to start tuning in. I got to check out what's going on at WCW. I kind of had, a little bit my finger on that pulse, but I was still at that point a diehard WWE fan, WWF. But when I saw Razor, who was one of my absolute favorites at the time, to see him show up as Scott Hall over on WCW, immediately changing the channel, and then to see Kevin Nash following that presentation really those guys, they were walking. And Bischoff has talked about wanting to bring like a reality-based perception to professional wrestling. They absolutely did that, introducing these guys as who they are, but still giving that illusion, walking that thin line that, man, is this WWE? Are they finally, you picked off all of our guys, you're making a little noise, we're going to come shut you down. But then, yes, so I remember where I was with my buddy Josh's. I had a group of WCW friends and WWE fans. So I was over with those guys, and I was still a little bit on the fence, with it. And when Hogan came out to see the epitome, what really symbolized the WWE, to see the turn there was absolutely shocking. And in that moment, Poz, immediately out of the gate. Now, I want to talk about in the time, and you talked a little bit about that, and we'll talk legacy as we get into these conversations. But in that moment, this is what you can call, brother, the New World Order. They immediately, Poz, changed the game, the landscape of professional wrestling.
No doubt about it. Completely flipped it up on its head and made it more realistic, made it different. I love the black and white. I love the promos. I love there was always kind of like that shoot element, but they really seemed like it was a shoot. It really seemed like there was this company from the north, maybe WWF invading WCW, but it just felt so realistic, so cool, so different. One of those things where you can never kind of recreate it, but I feel like so many promoters have tried to recreate it. You just can't do it. You can't go to that well again. I mean, they just revolutionized everything. And it made so many people that, like you said, were lapsed. They were watching. So many people that thought Hulk Hogan was a good guy. Wait, it's like now he's a bad guy. They tuned in. The older generation of fans that were kind of just curious of what is this? What is going on? How is wrestling cool again? What is this NWO stuff? And then you saw the T-shirts popping up. Then all the merch, like Hulkamania merch was huge. NWO merch was like that tenfold. I mean, it was just nuts with the NWO merch.
And I think one of the great stories with the merch is Kevin Nash has shared this, that they immediately knew they had something like, well, we got to get this out on the stands. And he's like, no. He shuts this down. He's like, you'll blow everything if you go out and put an NWO T-shirt behind a WCW merch table. He said, get me and Scott the merchandise. We'll get some hot girls at bikinis, go out in, outside the arena and start pushing this stuff. So you still remain with that illusion. You're walking that fine line. And possibly, we talked about the lapsed fan and people coming back to see if this is real. What is this about? Are the companies really going at it? The sense of the raw realness behind it, but it didn't just attract the wrestling fan. The rest of the world took notice. And this was the driving catalyst for professional wrestling to really break through those barriers where they became the hot thing to be aligned with in all of entertainment, all of sports at the time.
Just absolutely nuts, like the cultural significance of the NWO. I mean, it is kind of like nutty to think about it. It's like, wow, it was like that much a part of like just the culture of the world at that point, of kind of where things were going, and like kind of all spearheaded by the NWO, oddly enough, a wrestling group, a wrestling organization, brother, if you will. So just it's surreal when you think about it and when you look back at it.
Now, when we look at that group at core, and we're going to talk about the expansion and look at some of the different members in the dynamics. But when you get down right to it, Poz, who would you say kind of embodied and was the true heart and soul of the NWO?
This is very easy, very simple. Scott Hall. To me, it's without Hall, there is no NWO, there is no group, there is no cool factor, there is no a lot of those catchphrases. I know Nash is part of that too, but it just felt like Hall was just a different level of it. And then even if you look further, when Hall starts to have his issues and he starts to miss time and you could see the NWO as a huge chink in the armor, a huge hole in the group, and they're not as cool, they're not as good. It's just like without Hall, it just doesn't seem to operate as well. And when you look at it, it's like, okay, without Hogan turning, it doesn't have that much attention to it. That just skyrocketed and made this just huge volcano that just exploded. But without Hall, without like the core group there, without the heart and soul, it wasn't the NWO like as we know it. It just wasn't as good. He, without a doubt, was the heart and soul of the group, like without a shadow of doubt.
Absolutely agree with you 100%. Hogan himself, as you said, that was kind of the explosion, of the volcano that brought everyone's attention to what was going on with it. But even when he showed up day one, the first member, number one, Scott Hall, he what the NWO really stood for. He is the anti-heroes, and they were the villains, but damn, they were so cool. It was hard not to, in some way. You would boo them, but you wanted to be them. People wanted to be that cool. They were the leaders of the pack, and that's what he oozed, that machismo that the NWO represented. And Hogan right there as well, as you said. And Hogan was one of those that you could almost tell he didn't fit in with the cool factor, which made it really easy for to dislike the group that got them the heat. But again, would have been nothing without the Hawks. So let's turn our attention to that. And we've heard some rumblings that it could have been one of those situations where that doesn't work for me, brother. And it was up to that last minute. Is this going to work? Is Hogan going to have cold feet and not want to do the turn? Who would they turn to? We've heard things very, that makes sense. Sting, who the long-term staple there in WCW. We've heard some crazy suggestions like Big King Mabel. It might have been it. Let me ask you, Poz. If not Hogan, then who?
Man, that's just, it wouldn't have worked if it's not Hogan first and foremost. But Sting was
at the level that it did.
Yes, without Hogan, it just doesn't work to the way it level. Like if it's Sting, then it kind of turns into like one of those things where like, okay, this is a wrestling storyline. Like, you know what I mean? It's not. It's interesting. You know what I mean? Like it still would have been cool. Would have been like, wow, I can't believe Sting turned. But then it's like, it's just a wrestling storyline. Sting's with these two guys that used to work for WCW, but the real thing is the WWF. So it was weird. The Bret Hart, I remember, was a rumor at the point because no one realized that his contract was still going with WWF. They thought it was over after WrestleMania. The internet wasn't as prevalent then, so we weren't as sure. Luger was an interesting one, which they obviously teased because he got injured during the match. He thought maybe he's coming back out. So that was kind of an interesting one. Mabel is just one of the funniest ones ever because I remember I mentioned that to Sullivan. He goes, Mabel? The hell are you talking about, Mabel? Like he had no idea what I was talking about. I was like, well, somebody fed that, obviously somebody fed that to Meltzer, probably as a joke. He's like, it's probably
no pun intended.
One of those, like one of those guys, they probably fed it to him as a joke, like that. Like obviously was never going to happen. Yokozuna was another rumor that wouldn't have worked.
Interesting. That would have might have been.
Bulldog was a rumor, but that doesn't make sense really because he was feuding with Shawn Michaels at that time in WWF. So there was a lot of weird ones out there. Honestly, if not Hogan, I guess you'd have to go Sting for just as far as maybe making an impact, but there's really nobody that would even close.
Let me ask you a name. The Sting one, I could envision that, as you said. I mean, obviously, go right. This is a wrestling angle here, but a name that I've never heard anyone really mention. What about Ric Flair?
I don't know if that like Flair with Hall and Nash, it just seems like two worlds colliding there that doesn't really fit. Like you put those pieces together.
The guy that likes, I could see the guy that likes to party. He's out there. I could see him and Nash and Hall rocking the limos to the parties. Obviously, Flair, heart and soul, even more so than WCW. And he's been known for the power alliances, the factions, obviously with the Horsemen that we make the great comparisons to. I'm just trying to think, would it have worked? He eventually does join the NWO, but at this time now we've got, wait a minute, the guy that's running WCW, but Ted Turner actually runs it, but he's on the payroll, but maybe he's got his own, maybe Eric Bischoff has been like that third guy to give that power struggle early on. Obviously not the name recognition because it wasn't as known than his role inside the company.
It was so great, though, months later with Piper, though, and Bischoff, how Piper was trying to wrestle and Bischoff lied. And he's saying, I'm trying to make the match. The guy won't get back to me. And they played that great video, I'm Your Man. And it says the Hollywood Bowl and Piper, this from like 92. And here showing it, it's like, wow, Piper really wants to fight Hogan. And then Bischoff's like, he's not returning my calls. And then Piper comes out. That's months later, obviously setting up for Starrcade, but after Halloween Havoc. So that was great. So I don't think Bischoff would have worked there either. It's just one of those things where it's like, unless you're getting this huge free agent from WWF, nobody's working. And that wouldn't even have worked to the level of Hogan turning heel because that was epic.
I guess it would be completely unrealistic, but the only one that probably could have done better than Hogan would have been Vince McMahon himself. Would have ended up showing up on camera. But everybody, all the kids, all of our friends, from sports teams, politicians, no matter what it was, all stretches of society wanted to be down with the NWO. Everybody was joining. Outside of those top members. We talk about the founding fathers, those main event caliber individuals. Poz, who was your favorite B player or maybe, you know, a breakthrough or something like that with the NWO?
It's hard to say because obviously there's so many guys in the group. It's like who do you kind of consider in that point? But I guess I mean he's definitely I would consider him NWO and part of the real NWO in the meat of it. But I would go with this is so random, and I don't think anybody else would possibly agree with me. But I love that the fact that they added Vincent, aka Virgil, to the group.
I
I know
had
he
him
was
on my
just a
short list.
just I know it's just like kind of a quote unquote jobber for the NWO or whatever. I just love that they added another WWF guy. I love that they were making fun of Vince McMahon, calling him Vincent and stuff. I just thought that was so funny and just so like ridiculous. It's like now they're adding him, but he fit the group. He like it made sense with Hall, Nash, and Hogan and DiBiase and Six. He just made sense. I liked it. And then just another guy just to throw in there. I loved Bagwell because it actually really elevated him. That's the one guy that you could really say, like, okay, NWO, we just gave a guy a shirt and we would try to get them over. It actually really did get him over from just being kind of the nerdy Marcus Alexander and then, you know, like the American male. That really did get him over and got a really cool character out there and explored.
I had both of those on my short list, Vincent. But Bagwell, I think another individual that it helped kind of catapult, let us see that personality, and even more so than Bagwell, that moved them into a true main event would have been Scott Steiner. As well. We got to see kind of that evolution of where he was at and really found his way in the NWO with the Scott Steiner that we all know and love today. I'm going to go a little international flavor here as we talk about the expansion and everybody wanting to be a part of the NWO. I think Scott Norton was great. And then going over and representing in New Japan, the NWO over there, and actually taking home the big title over there. And even then, you know, I always kind of wondered, like, why isn't he getting that recognition? I heard Bischoff talk about that years later, about it. He just didn't want to confuse things about, okay, what's this championship? It made sense to me then, but on that big scale, a great representation from a hell of a dude, probably a little too nice for professional wrestling at Scott Norton.
Yeah, definitely. Loved them. Vicious and delicious, him and Buff. Good little tandem there.
Well, we got plenty. We have our all of our favorites and things like that. Let's flip the script here and talk about maybe our least favorable or worst talent that joined the NWO. Poz, your take.
See, there's so many guys in there that were just really good and maybe good elsewhere, but didn't really fit in with the NWO. So I wouldn't really consider anybody like a worst member. I just really, I didn't like the Disciple at all in the NWO. I felt like that didn't fit. And like, it was almost like, okay,
Buddy favorite.
back. Yeah. Like, okay, we're going back to Hogan's like friendship in '96. He brought out the birthday cake for Hogan at Hog Wild to give him the birthday cake after he won the title, and they beat the living hell out of him. It's like, okay, now we see Hogan is really NWO, like he's not favoring his buddies anymore. He beat up the Nasty Boys who thought they were going to be in the NWO. He's not being a buddy anymore. In '98, when they fired Waltman and then they had Disciple come into the group, that was like the turning point. It was like, oh man, like what are they doing? Like now it's not NWO anymore. Now it's just like Hogan just bringing in his buddies. So I don't like him, and I just didn't think Stevie Ray fit into the NWO at all either. It was just weird. I know they're breaking him off from Booker T and they're trying to put him. I just didn't think he fit at all.
I think it was just an easy way to make a more of a little heat, a counter.
Yeah,
you know,
I just didn't like it
between them. I don't know if they necessarily needed that with the brothers splitting up. And I'm glad, you know, I think when I answered some question, and if we would ask most people, they would just go to someone that they thought stunk in the ring or it wasn't over or something like that. But yeah, to me, it was about fits. You know, who do you see representing those NWO colors? And I've got two. And my first one is my number one, and that's Bret Hart. You know, who really represented everything that the NWO was against, and you still believe somewhere in there. I know it was so cool to have the WWF talent seem to be taking over, but you knew in your heart that what the WWE represented, Bret stood for, and just the traditions of professional wrestling were so important to him. So I would put him up there. And my other suggestion here ties in a little bit to our next topic. Down the road in a later version of the NWO, I would also include Shawn Michaels, you know, who was the average. I know they're all buddies and all of that, but, you know, with DX and that. But I do want to talk about, Poz, and get your take on this when the NWO shows up in the WWE.
Now, are we talking the good NWO with Hall, Nash, and Hogan? Are we talking about that? Or are we talking about the after that.
We can talk about the entire thing. All right, so we do get, it's years later, which I think is a little bit of the disappointment. They've aged there, the thrill, the luster, it's lost its shine. But if you remember, Vince's and his mission at this point is to destroy the company that I made. And he said he's in that chair and he turns and you can see that on the back of the chair in the mirror is the nWo. A little bit of excitement. I do remember at the time, I wasn't over the top about it because the invasion angle had already kind of killed my passion, my interest in what was happening with anything between those companies. But still, okay, here these guys are coming back. Maybe we can capture a little bit of what we lost in these dream matches. But from the get-go, I think there was really, even as cool as Nash and Hall were in those roles, the WWE fan audience still love them as Diesel and Razor, and they ultimately love the Hulkster as the red and yellow and not Hollywood.
To me, when they first came in and Vince did that, I loved that. I thought that was so cool, so different. I'm like, now you're bringing these MFers back. Like, geez, I should have brought them back for the invasion. But I was like, that was cool. That was great. Like, he's got to kill his own creation because Flair was part owner. And like, I kind of like that. I thought that was cool, different. Obviously, put a jolt into Mania that year. They drew really well for Mania, considering the trajectory of where they were headed down. They kind of scooped back up for Hogan Rock at Mania. So I like that, and I liked Hogan Rock and Mania. That was awesome. I just felt like the Austin Hall feud didn't really go that well. The Nash got hurt, so they were kind of just snake bit, and obviously Hall loses and Hogan loses, so you could tell Vince just wanted to kind of kill off the NWO and be like, oh, well, WWE is better than the NWO. They're better than WCW, which is another stupid thing that Vince always does. But when they bring the NWO back again, when Hall's gone and then Nash is there, but then they have the Giant, but they still have 6, and they put Booker T in the group, they put Shawn Michaels in the group. That was just terrible, just awful booking. They just completely inept and clueless. But when they first came in, I kind of liked it with Hogan, Hall, and Nash.
You had mentioned as well there. Let's go to reliving the moment, and we see nWo years later make a return in the Sting Triple H match as well for a big pop and a pretty cool, but maybe not as memorable as we look at it now.
Yeah, horrible finish too. That was really, really bad.
Absolutely. Well, again, we talked about nWo taking over. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. One of the big knocks and conversations that fans, even the Legends of the Talking Heads podcasts regularly debate here, is did the nWo grow too much? And you know what they say, man, size matters, Poz. What are your take when people say that, when it got outside of the core of obviously the first 3, but maybe like the first 5, that it started to lose its luster. And that's when they went kind of jumped the shark with it.
So the initial group, obviously, Hall, Nash, Hogan is great. And everyone's saying, oh, they should just kept it at 3. No, it makes sense that they added guys like DiBiase because then it's like, okay, they have a money man. Like, that was cool. And it kept your interest on Nitro. Okay, when the Giant gets added in, it's like, oh, do they really need the Giant? But if you actually look at it at the storyline device of what they're doing with him about the feud with Hogan, him kind of not helping him against Piper at Starrcade, it kind of, and him winning World War III and then saying, oh, but I thought I got a title shot. It did make it more interesting and intriguing. So it was kind of good. And then it just made it look like, wow, these guys that are taking over just added one of the biggest wrestlers, on the planet to the team. Like, they're unstoppable. So it kind of made it like, that was like, I thought, a good thing. And like, okay, Hogan's totally bullshitting this guy. He's taking him under his wing. Obviously, he's just trying to hold him back. So that kind of leads to a Hogan Giant feud. So I kind of like that aspect. The 6th thing is absolutely perfect. That was awesome. What an addition. He added so much to that group. Adding Bischoff was so great. And because you're like, wait, how are they getting away with all this stuff? And how are they always at the building? And how are they selling merch? Like, all this other stuff. Then you realize, oh shit, they had somebody working from them. That was the boss behind the scenes.
Yeah, like, just not somebody. They had the guy.
Yeah, the guy. So that was cool. That was great. Loved Vincent, a part of the group. That I just thought that was great. Buff, that's great. And that's where they should have stopped. Like, then it starts getting too much with the boss man and VK Wall Street, and it just adding way too many guys. Although I'll throw this in there, I love fake Sting too. The nWo Sting, bogus Sting. I loved him, part of the group, even though technically not a part of the group. At that point,
For me, the complete expansion worked. I am a total mark for the documentaries like Lockup and Gangland, where they take a look inside like the prison system or the gangs, and you look at their politics and how they work and how they control inside of those prisons or the streets, and it's all a numbers game. It's part of the mission statement of the NWO, so much it's in the entrance. We are taking over. And how do you do that? You do that by growing your numbers, by aligning your military force with the numbers. Now, granted, you're going to have people at the top. You're going to have your generals, your shot callers. You're going to have your enforcers, your numbers guys, all the way down to foot soldiers. You need all of those types of individuals. And it also the same with any kind of empire, military movement that we have seen throughout the history of man. If it's the Mongolians, if it's the Persians, if it's Rome, when they came in to conquer a new land, it was either get on board or you're gone. So, and that's what the NWO was about. It was about growing those numbers, growing those masses so that they would just overwhelm and consume WCW. So for me, it made complete sense about how they would operate that way. And again, you have those guys at the top, your shot callers, but your foot soldiers, the front line, who's going to eat those bullets, just as important for me inside the realm of the NWO. So sure, some of them got silly, but that's what you want. You need those types of individuals if you're going to conquer the masses.
Maybe too many guys, though. Like they said, you just gave a guy a shirt and you thought he'd be over because he's got an NWO shirt. Doesn't exactly work out that way.
You recruit every you get in, man. So it worked for me in that sense. Poz, we said, man, it's going to be almost next year's going to be 30 years since the NWO. It is insane in that time what it has meant to professional wrestling and still to today in 2025, how important the creation, the group has been in the landscape of professional wrestling. What is the continuing legacy of the NWO?
To me, legacy of the NWO changed wrestling forever. Greatest faction of all time, the most influential group of all time. Without the NWO, there is no Attitude Era. There is no Steve Austin. There is no evil Mr. McMahon. There is no, them, taking over the wrestling business and making billions of dollars today. They changed the game forever, changed the landscape, a part of the lexicon, a part of mainstream. You still see NWO shirts everywhere today. When I go to concerts, I see them. Just randomly.
Go throw one of these up. You're going to get it back, and they know what you're talking about.
And no joke, the garbage man at my house was wearing an NWO shirt. I threw it up. He threw it back. I was like, that is awesome. And I was like, I cannot believe I just saw a guy outside my house with an NWO shirt. And yes, it legitimately happened. I was like, that is just unbelievable. I've seen, like at Wawa, I've seen a guy walking where he was wearing the NWO shirt. I'm like, oh my God, it's just the Kardashians freaking randomly wearing it. And they don't even probably know what that is, but they were wearing it. So it's just a part of the mainstream culture for life.
You still got sports teams that still rock some kind of version of the NWO shirts with their own themes. You can see it prevalent inside of their locker rooms. The crotch chops that came from the NWO. I remember I got flagged in high school football like 3 times for excessive celebrations for crotch chopping after some TDs. Again, right here, you throw this up out in public. Yeah, people know what you're talking about. You're going to get a 2-sweet back. A wrestling fan somewhere when Hendrix hits the jukebox and someone starts giving you the Hogan entrance. Hey, I'm going to work with it. That's my dance move to it. Look at all the factions inside of professional wrestling that tried to emulate and try to want to capture all the invasion angles that we have seen since then. The LWO to this day is so popular inside WWE, a spinoff of WWE International with the New Japan NWO. All of those making ways towards today, still a #1 merch dealer. To me, the greatest faction that has ever existed inside of professional wrestling. I know that might be a hot take with some, but the Horsemen never went mainstream. They weren't the hottest thing in society. We could search forever before we find someone wearing a Horseman t-shirt today. It is the NWO. They were the game changers, the absolute best at it.
There's no doubt about it. I agree.
All right, Poz. Well, it is time as we wrap things up here for our pro wrestling hop of the week. And I had a good one, but I'm going to save it for next week. I've been laughing all week about it, so I had to go find something WW or NWO theme, and I think this one's pretty true. Now, the NWO, they were always talking about we're taking over, but in the end, Poz, it was actually DX that took over the professional wrestling business.
That is true.
All right, Poz, we're getting settled in for a big weekend of professional wrestling action. We'll be back. You and I will be back next week. We'll cover. Man, we've got AEW All in Texas, the big stadium show. Hot Atlanta, WWE TakeOver. WWE's got some big competition this weekend. It ain't AEW. Beyonce's in town in Atlanta, and she's selling out that football stadium, brother. Big competition. All right, everybody, we will see you next week right back here on The 10 Count.